Dear viewers, welcome to this episode of Expert Speaks. Post the pandemic and the India growing at a rapid pace, we are observing one trend. A lot of people who are residing in US are turning back. People were talking about brain drain. Is it a reverse drain? I do not know. But more and more people, month after month, year after year, are coming back to India with an intention to live in India here. These are the people who have the US green cards or they have US citizenship. They are not sure how this is going to play out. Should they come back and live in India, renounce their US citizenship, or they should keep the US citizenship? The consequences that are going to follow in case if they come and live in India all over again. In this episode, the expert of the week, Mr. Nikhil Varghese, who is a specialist on inter-domicile movement specialist, he is going to talk to you about the various aspects of renouncing US citizenship and living in India all over again. This is NRI Money Clinic for you, and I am Dr. Chandrakant, but your financial guide for a happy living.
NRI Money Clinic. No hype, just the right advice.
Dear viewers, the expert of the week is Mr. Nikhil Varghese. For those of you who regularly watch my channel, he is regularly present on the channel. For those of you who are watching the channel for the first time, let me give a brief introduction of Mr. Nikhil Varghese. He is by profession a chartered accountant, a man with extraordinary experience of working with the Big Four. He has worked with a wealth management firm. He has headed the South Indian division, a man who has founded a startup called Yellow, which is working on the digital solution towards inheritance-related issues, creation of online wills, providing executor services to clients across the globe. Welcome to the show, Mr. Nikhil Varghese.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for inviting me and having me part of your channel. It's always a pleasure to be part of your part of this conversation and interact with your user group. It's always a pleasure and look forward to a very interactive conversation today as well.
Thank you, Nikhil. Nikhil, let's discuss the topic today. There are a lot of guys from different parts of the world, particularly the US-based NRIs, are coming back a day in and day out. I keep getting a lot of inquiries about what should we do? We are US citizens, we are green card holders. Should we renounce our US citizenship? If that is the case, what happens? How should we take it up? There's no clarity around this particular topic. And you being a person who is providing consultancy to people who are moving from one domicile to another domicile, I just thought you are the perfect person to answer these questions. From an estate planning perspective, how does the citizenship fit in?
Absolutely great question, sir. From a estate planning perspective, citizenship plays a very, very significant role because when we look at creating an estate plan, you need to examine families' unique circumstances, which involve, various aspects of, especially when you look at today, we'll talk more from a US standpoint, US citizenship or US green card holder, how that kind of helps or, kind of creates complexities with creating an estate plan, right? And therefore, it becomes a very, very important aspect to look at. And usually when you look at, situations like when we look at estate planning for families, we have to definitely consider what is their citizenship status, not only about the primary family, but the overall family in terms of saying what is the structure, what is the domicile nature, etc. Because one of the fundamental aspect is that US imposes something called as death tax, inheritance tax, estate duty, whatever the nomenclature, right? Effectively, what you're talking about is that if you are a US domicile or a US person, I'll leave the legalese out of it. But if you are a US domicile, then if you pass away and your assets, when I say assets, your global assets were to be passed on to your children, forget outside of bloodline, even children, US imposes something called as inheritance tax or estate duty, which is effectively is a 40% rate that needs to be paid by families before they can get access to these assets, right? And therefore, it's very importantly considered or rather looked at as part of the overall planning standpoint, because if you miss out, this is a very critical element. Your estate plan itself may not be fully kosher, right? And therefore, it's very, very important for one to look at it and plan for estate duty as well from an overall estate planning standpoint.
Nikhil, you brought the topic of estate duties. Can you a little bit give more information on this estate duties, how impactful it gets, how important it is? Is it something which is marginal? Can that be sidelined, or a serious thought has to be given while planning for the migration into another country, let's say coming back to India?
No, very, very important aspect, right? Because estate duty for US specifically applies if you're a US domicile. When I say US domicile, effectively, it would mean that do you hold US citizenship or have you held green card for more than 8 years, right? That makes you a US domicile. With that, whether you come back to India with US citizenship, etc., it doesn't matter. When you pass away, estate duty as a tax or a levy is still applicable for your estate. Now, what is this levy, right? That's a bigger question, saying, is it marginal? Is it large? It's all depend on the asset size, but the law states that if your assets crosses a specific threshold, today that threshold is about 12 million per person. So if your assets are beyond 12 million, US applies a 40% estate duty on the assets that is received by your kids post your lifetime. Effectively, to say if you have 20 million on 8 million, there's a 40% tax. Now, the important factor to note here is that this 12 million limit that we're talking about was doubled in 2017 during Trump regime, wherein earlier it was much lower. They doubled it to, at that point in time, about close to 11 million. With inflation, it has come up to 12 million now. But it also has a sunset clause. The sunset clause proposes this to be brought back to 6 million per person, right? Having said that, Biden in the last year wanted to bring this down even much before the sunset clause itself. But unfortunately, he didn't get the support of the House, and therefore it didn't go through. But having said that, what I hear from various advisors in the US is that it's very likely in 2026, this limits will be brought back to the previous numbers, because the way it went about increasing, I don't think the intent was really met. But having said that, that's all in the air. We don't know what will happen. But something which is very more certain is that, or more likely than not, is that the limits will come down. Now, what is the impact here? Is that it doesn't stop at the you may just come back and ask, so what how does it matter? I have a 12 million or a 6 million limit. Let's only beyond that, if the assets go, is where I need to worry about. Two aspects to look at here is that, one, you don't need to look at the value of the assets today. You should look at what could be the value of the assets when the event arises, which could be 10, 20, 30 years hence. The numbers could be much more. And therefore, if you were to plan something, you need to plan today, because you can lock these values at current values and not look at the higher or appreciated values in the future. Second is that this limit of 6 million, 12 million, whatever those numbers are, is a combination of lifetime gift limits plus a threshold for computing inheritance tax. What do I mean here? Is that if you were to gift during lifetime, right, gift also is subject to erosion of these limits, which essentially would mean that, say, out of this 12 million limit, say you were to gift about 6 million during your lifetime, which essentially would mean that post your lifetime, when families were to, or when the authorities were to compute estate duty, now in the threshold, instead of 12 becomes only 6, because you already utilized 6 during lifetime, right? So it's only the adjusted limit that applies towards the threshold, and beyond that, 40% is applied towards estate duty. Here again, we are not talking about tax on incomes, it's tax on the value of the assets, and which becomes a much more higher quantum that we are talking about. Essentially 40% of the value of the asset itself, which is a huge tax or a levy duty that one needs to pay to the government before you can get access to the asset.
When you talk about billion, it is billion in US dollar. It has nothing to do with the INR.
No.
And you mentioned about this threshold limit of 12 million, 6 million, 8 million, whatever the figure. Now, in the case of US, they file the tax return, husband and wife together. This limit is for the family, or husband separate, wife separate? How does the computation happen there?
Each person, each US citizen has the limit that I mentioned is one individual's limit. As couple, you have double the limit. Effectively,
Right.
if I was a US citizen and my spouse is also a US citizen, we can freely transfer assets between ourselves without any limitations. It's only beyond spouses when you transfer these assets, either by way of gift or by inheritance, these limits kick in.
So nobody can prevent taxation by giving gift. Finally, during a lifetime, the gift limits plus the inheritance limit will kick in, and the remainder amount is subjected to inheritance tax.
Absolutely right.
Nikhil, now you at the outset you mentioned the broad contours of how citizenship is important in the estate planning. Now let's take the specific cases. There is somebody who is living in US, let's say US citizen. He comes back to India and he wants to renounce the US citizenship and take Indian citizenship all over again. How does that impact the estate planning? Can you give a brief about how where all it can impact, the pros and cons of it?
Absolutely. It's a very, very good question. In fact, in the last couple of years, we have had a good number of inquiries on these lines saying, should I renounce my US status? And because US levies, taxes, even if you're not unlike other jurisdictions, saying if you're an Indian citizen, you are not a Indian taxpayer if you're not a resident in India. But unfortunately for US, if you're a US green card or a US citizenship, if you hold US citizenship, even if you're not in the US, you still continue to be a US tax resident for all tax purposes, which would mean that no matter which part of the globe you are, you still pay taxes in the US and you continue to pay tax in other jurisdictions, but of course you get credit. So therefore, this is a very, very important question that all families have, especially the ones who are looking to come back to India, right? In that case, should one give away their US status? It's a matter of multiple factors. It's not a straightforward yes or no answer, right? What is the benefit on the face of it is that if you give up your US citizenship, of course, thereafter, you are not subject to US taxes. When I say US taxes, you're talking about estate duty or inheritance tax, whatever you want to put those nomenclature. Those aspects go away with respect to non-US domiciled assets. For instance, if you have assets in the US, you also have assets in India. If your asset component is very low in the US, but most of your assets are in India, if you continue to be a US citizen, on your demise, these assets, even in India, is exposed towards US estate duty. But if you were to renounce your citizenship, then only the US cited assets will be subject to taxes, estate duty in the US. Of course, the threshold limits needs to also be breached for that to apply. But India assets or any other non-US citus assets will not be subject to US estate duty. But is it so straightforward? The answer is no. For you to also renounce US citizenship, there are certain implications. Something called as exit tax comes into the picture. Now, if your asset values, or if you are been a long-term resident of US and you've been paying taxes to certain levels, I think the numbers go beyond $180,000 or so. If you're paying such quantum of taxes, or if you have assets beyond $2 million, then you are deemed to be a qualified person for exit. Now, what does exit means is that when you renounce citizenship, US IRS will look at your asset base to say, oh, you bought these assets at 100. Today, the value of the assets is, say, 150. On the 50, you pay a deemed capital gains. Because you're exiting the US status, I can't further tax you on these assets. And therefore, why don't you pay up tax on notional basis today? And thereafter, tomorrow, when you're not a US person, we don't need to worry about any future appreciation which has happened. Essentially to say that this appreciation happened as a US person and therefore pay the taxes before you can leave the country, right? That is, which is relevant. Of course, it's a capital gains tax that you end up paying. The important point here is that it's not about paying the taxes. You're paying on notional gains, which would mean that if you were to look at from a double taxation perspective in India's standpoint, you may not be even subject to tax here because it's not a sale. You still own the assets. You're not transfer these assets. The notional aspect is more from a US perspective. And tomorrow, when you sell the assets in India, you look at the previous value of how you procured these assets. And when you sell, you will end up paying tax on the entire gain. But this particular notional gain or tax that you paid or exit tax that you paid may not be even available as a credit in India. It becomes a challenge. So therefore, there is a planning that is needed to say, how do you maximize this? Can we look at actual sale happening in the US itself before you transfer? And the best case scenario to have as an exit solution is that if you have more and more liquid asset, when I say liquid asset, bank balances, etc., which doesn't have appreciation, right? Shares have a notional value which you can look at. Bank US dollars 2 million means 2 million. You can't give a different value to it. If you have asset in those lines when you're at the time of exit, you don't end up paying even exit taxes at all. That's a pro tip if I were to put out there. So ideally, that planning is very important before you start. It can't be a one-day affair. It is at least 6 months to a year of planning to say how to plan for exit and then make those specific moves about transfer. Having said that, it's not straightforward also. Once you're in India, you should also, you can't be without a passport, without a citizenship. You should also start applying for your Indian passport, or could be any other jurisdictional passport. You can plan for it. If you're looking at India specifically, the point is that you have to renounce US citizenship before you can get Indian passport, because India doesn't accept or find it legal to have dual citizenship, but US accepts dual citizenship. Therefore, if you're looking at another jurisdiction, then probably you could have the second passport and then renounce this. But if you're looking specifically for India, you have to renounce US first and then acquire Indian citizenship. Having said that, are you fully out of estate duty exposure once you move to India? The answer is currently yes. India did have an estate duty laws in the past. It has been abolished in 85. But if it gets reintroduced in India, probably planning around that also need to be undertaken. That's a future call to be taken. But today, you will be out of estate duties.
Nikhil, you mentioned about this. But as a bullet point, can you give me the pros and cons of, there's a dilemma. Should I renounce my US citizenship or should I keep it? It's a difficult choice to make. Can we give the viewers what is that which works in their favor? What is that which goes against them?
Absolutely. Of course, like you rightly said, it's not a straightforward answer. And that's what I said earlier also. It's not black and white decision. It's not like it's skewed towards only benefits or skewed only towards cons. It's more about what you want to achieve, right? Basis that you need to take a very conscious call of saying, do I want to renounce citizenship or not? And is the cost that US citizenship comes along, is it worth bearing that cost with respect to the aspects that I'm losing out? Is it worthwhile? That's the call that every individual has to take on their own. It's not something which is a formula that is available. Anybody can make a choice and say, oh, this is not required or this is required for me, right? With that, at least as a background, what are the basic or broad pros of renouncing US status? One, of course, is tax benefits, right? By renouncing US status, which is either citizenship or green card, you get a relief from all your complex US tax obligations, worldwide income taxes to be reported, and potentially even US taxes on incomes that you earn living abroad as well, right? Your current incomes also become only subject to US taxes only if it is US sourced. Everything that is outside of US source will not be subject to US taxes. That's point number one. Second, financial privacy. Very important, because today as a US citizen, you will end up reporting all your global assets, incomes, everything to the US IRS, right? Once you give away, you don't need to now you're not obligated to make any reportings with respect to your global incomes in the US. You need to file returns in the US only if you have US incomes, not anything beyond that. All right. Your state planning from that standpoint becomes also simplified. When I say how does it get simplified? Because obvious aspects that we spoke at length earlier, as a non-US person, now you are not subject to US estate duty per se for the assets that are outside of, that's not a situs of US. And therefore, fewer things that you need to look at from a estate planning standpoint. You can forget it's not like you can forget completely, but most of the aspects with respect to US complications that arises on an estate planning, that can be looked, you can forget it and look at more from where you are currently situated, where you intend to be in the future, plan those aspects for your estate planning. And the other aspect is that you have a freedom to invest, right? As a US person, you as a financial advisor, you know that there are restrictions on certain assets classes that they can't touch. It's not that they can't invest, they have a punitive taxation in the US for some of those asset classes. Now, with that going away, you are free to invest in various asset classes that you couldn't invest in the past, right? That's a important aspect. And more than that, even if you look at real estate, etc., in India, because you've given up US citizenship and taken India citizenship, now you can even touch restricted classes such as agricultural land, etc., which you couldn't have invested as an NRI or an OCI card holder. Right. The last is that you may also benefit from certain various schemes that is available locally in India, which is available only for residents. Those benefits is something which you could also kind of enjoy when you look at giving up US citizenship and become an Indian resident. And of course, this doesn't apply if you were to choose a non-US country, but not in India as your new citizenship status. Right, then you're back to you don't get the benefits of what we spoke from a pure India perspective. Having said that, what are the cons or the negatives of giving up US citizenship? The first and foremost is that as US citizen, you have good number of rights with respect to right to vote, right to various benefits. If you recollect, during COVID times, there was airlifting of US citizens happening from India to US when everybody was stranded, right? Such benefits completely go away because you're no more a US citizen. That's something which is very, very important aspect. Having said that, the few other benefits that you lose out as compared to India and not another passport, if you look at, is a travel limitation, right? Travel limitation in twofold. One, Indian passport doesn't have so much ease of access to other countries as compared to US passport. But of course, what we have seen other families do is that instead of India, they take another passport, which also gives the benefit of travel. And therefore, this kind of gets negated. Having said that, if you were to take Indian passport, then of course, you have a restriction with respect to, it's not that it's too restricted with it still does happen. It's not that you can't, enter a jurisdiction freely without visa. Visa on arrivals are very few for Indian passports. But the other aspect is that if you were to take Indian passport, then, like I said earlier, India doesn't legally consider having dual citizenship as a aspect that one could have. And therefore, you'll have to temporarily for a period not have US passport, and you will be in the verge of applying for Indian passport. And that short duration, you may end up not having an access to travel outside of India, but with your OCI card, etc., you can travel easily within India without any restriction. Okay. Now, exit tax is also another aspect one need to consider. We spoke about it earlier. It's a notional tax that one needs to pay. And therefore, if you are a qualified person for exit taxes, then that's a con that will apply when you renounce. And planning around this can be done, but that's an aspect that one need to look at. Children's education and various other benefits that you are looking at from a US perspective is something which comes with the US citizenship status. And that is something which you may end up losing. Essentially, to say if your children are settled abroad or settled in the US or are planning to go to US for study, etc., you may want to take a call saying, are you only giving up your status? If your children are also US status, US citizens, should they give up or not is a question that you may want to take a call. But that's another aspect which one need to look at, especially if children are settled abroad. Is there a possibility that you may go back and settle in the US because they're also there? And, during the later part of your life, do you want to be with your children or happy in India? That's dilemma is there in your mind, then it's a aspect that one need to carefully consider here. Of course, the other few aspects could be limited access to social security aspects that is there otherwise available, full-fledged available to US citizen, etc. And again, more so from a travel standpoint, future immigration, right? Because you need to still get a visa for your entry into US, etc. And those things comes into the picture. These are broad, pros and cons one could consider. Like I said, there's no clear formula to say, hey, if these are met, it's good to give up. Or if these are not met, it's not good to give up. It's more a trade-off of what you are willing to give away or what you can't give away kind of results in saying, should you or should you not renounce your citizenship?
I want more clarity on two things.
Sure.
If somebody wants to come and live in India, what happens to the social security that they are going to get from US, as well as what happens to the 401k accounts or similar accounts which they have held in US? What happens to that?
It doesn't get disregarded, right? You continue to get your 401k, continues to be active. It'll be there, once you redeem there, you can bring it into India and all of it. It's absolutely fine. Do you get tax benefit in India? Answer is no, you don't. But the point is, it's not that you lose out on your 401k or your social security payouts that happens on a general basis. That is not, you don't lose out on any of those.
That is, if you have a US citizenship, you live in India, so all these things will continue to be there.
Absolutely.
But if you give up, the social security aspect is gone. What you would
Not
have
fully.
got it.
There are conditions to it. It's not straightforward. Depending on which, if you're in India and if you have held your US citizenship for 10 years or so, or if you have lived in the US for last 10 years, etc., there are certain credits that accrue. I think up to 40 credits have already accrued. Then you can get your social security payments also in India. I know, family, I know US citizens who have immigrated into India, given up US citizenship, and still continuing to receive social security benefits in India.
Even when they are not the US citizens,
Yes,
because they have
yes.
reached those credits.
Yes.
All in all, what emerges from this conversation is giving up US citizenship is not something which can be put on a checklist and say, oh, this works in your favor or this does not work in your favor. There are individual circumstances, like your children, what you want to achieve, what is your asset value, where exactly you want to spend your final days. All these things have to be factored in. So there is a mixed bag of pros and cons. The best is put this both and take an independent decision what works in your favor. That could be one thing. If you are confused and you seek a professional assistance like a person like you, sit with a consultation, explain the situation. If you have missed out something, the professionals can help you with arriving at a particular decision. So it's not a decision which can be taken in a hurry. You need to think over it. You should spend time on it and take professional assistance and take a decision which is in your best interest. I probably say that is the right approach to follow in this case.
Absolutely. And I just want to add on one thing here is that one is take time to make this decision. Once you either on your own or with professional help, if you wait to take a decision, plan. If you decide to exit or if you don't decide to exit, then basis your situation, plan out saying what exactly you need to do thereafter. Even if you want to exit, how to plan for exit taxes. If you're not planning to exit, then how to plan for your estate duties in the US, etc. You need to still do that comprehensive exercise so that you have a holistic view of saying, okay, make this conversation. I've had this conversation with a professional, understood that for so and so reason, I've either decided to renounce or not renounce. And then am I covered holistically? That's a satisfaction or check the box that you need to do at your end.
Nikhil, you elaborated on all these issues. The audience is still confused. Should I renounce or should I continue to have US citizenship? Let's leave the discussion there. Irrespective of the decision that they make, are there points that they have to keep in mind from a point of view of estate planning? Can you briefly say within a minute's time?
Absolutely right. As in, and it's not an easy decision to make, and that's why if it was black and white, we could have actually eased it down on the audience here to say this is the situation where you can renounce. But unfortunately, it's very, very fact, case specific, emotion specific, family specific, and therefore it can't be a straightforward decision. It has to be, its decision will be different for each person. The weightages for each reasons become different. But having said that, what are those key points that one need to look at as a housekeeping before you do any of these? As an estate planner, in my mind, is that first you need to create your will or get your will done. Because you're looking at audience today who are looking at renouncing, coming to India, which would mean that you may have assets in multi-jurisdictions. You should also have separate wills for separate jurisdictions, which becomes a easy process for your family tomorrow to recover assets. Otherwise, it becomes a execution nightmare to have one will for all your global assets. But having said that, if your asset values are higher or your situations are a little different, probably explore aspects of estate duty that could trigger your way in the US for your global assets. Plan a trust in India, plan a trust in the US. All those kind of helps in locking values and ensuring your families have access to these assets, because the bigger trouble comes with not actually paying the taxes, because your asset composition may not permit you to pay taxes. Your asset could be such a way that it's not fully liquid and the family struggle to pay taxes. You could have a composition of adding various other plans. Once you know that which direction you're taking, see how to mitigate these. Having insurances in place, jumbo insurances in place helps with transfer, mitigating certain estate duty planning, also seeing what else can be done, because you can't pull assets from India easily for payment of these taxes in the US, because RBI has 1 million limit that has been prescribed, right? So therefore, all these aspects needs to be planned in. Therefore, one, you need to first look at your basics of estate planning, which is have a will in place, maybe explore whether you need to have a trust, etc. in place, have a conversation professional that kind of gets into the play. Once you know that, and when you're having a conversation with professional, look at what else you need to do such a way that tomorrow when you're not around, your families don't struggle, and have those best practices in place so that everything goes smoothly when you're not around.
Dear viewers, NRI Money Clinic has an association with Team Yellow, which is headed by Mr. Nikhil Wagis. If any of you are looking out for professional assistance to arrive at the decision what you should be doing to reduce your estate transfer related costs, or how it needs to be transferred to the next generation, you can make best use of services provided by Team Yellow. How to reach them? Just send us a WhatsApp message. Our number is given here in the description box below. We have also provided a link there. Click on the link and it takes you to the WhatsApp and send us a message. When you route your professional consultations through us, needless to say, Yellow will be offering you handsome discounts on the services provided by them. If you have a need for this, do not delay. Send us that message now. Nikhil, thank you very much for all these points for the benefit of our viewers. We remain in gratitude to you for your kindness to appear here on our channel for the benefit of the NRI community.
My pleasure, Dr. Bhatt. Like I said, it's always a pleasure to have a conversation, an interactive conversation with you. And I know there's going to be a good number of queries that will come from your audience, and we are more than happy to assist them as much as we can, right? To the extent we are able to do that, we will definitely help and get a right solution for them.
Dear viewers, hope the video that I have done today helped you to understand the pros and cons of renouncing your US citizenship and coming and living in India. If it did help you, please do give me a thumbs up. If you're a person who is watching my channel for the first time, or if you're yet to subscribe for the channel, please hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon. Don't forget to share these videos with all the near and dear ones, friends and relatives, and for those people to whom these videos may add value. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. I shall be back with you next Tuesday with yet another topic, with yet another expert. Till then, stay safe. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Press the bell icon for more details and subscribe our channel.